What the book talks about is two key things. One is finding your zone of genius. We have a zone of incompetence, which are
Oh
things
yeah.
we suck at that we should
Oh
never
yes.
do.
Oh yes.
We have a zone of competence. We're okay at it, but other people can do it way better. And the trap, Daniel, is the zone of excellence because we're really good at it, but it doesn't light our fire. It's not our zone of genius. So what happens is we get caught in that and we burn out. If you're in your zone of genius, if you find what it is you love doing and do best, and you focus on that, then you will continue to thrive and prosper and have high energy.
Hello. Good morning, or good afternoon, or good night, depending on what part of the world you're visiting us. I am Daniel Marcos, the host of the podcast Learning Up, where we talk to people about learning, how companies learn and go to the next stage. And this is a very special episode for me because the person we're going to interview today was my personal coach around 20 years ago when I moved to the US, and he was game changer. You're going to hear a lot about that. But let me introduce first Rich Russakoff. Rich is a globally renowned business coach and serial entrepreneur with over 45 years experience helping CEOs and entrepreneurs scaling their company. I met Rich when we invited him to speak to Mexico City for EO Mexico City chapter in around 1999, I think, or 2000. And then we became good friends. And then when I moved to Austin, I hired Rich as my coach. So this has been many, many years, and he was game changer. I'll tell you the story a little bit later. He's the CEO of Bottom Line Up Enterprises, where he helps make it simple and make things happen approach for entrepreneurs, delivering guidance on rapid growth companies and be able to really understand what's their strategy for the company. It's incredible how, and this is going to be on the personal side, it was game changer for me to really help to understand the strategy and how to build my mortgage company that I had many years ago, and then how to get the right bank financing around that. His reputation is around cutting edge knowledge, practical, real time information, and of course, a lot of experience. He's been coaching entrepreneurs for many, many years. He's been an entrepreneur and CEO himself for many years, but he has also coached a lot of amazing CEOs. Rich, how are you? Welcome.
I'm really good, and I'm so excited to be here with you today, Daniel, and to see the tremendous growth you've had in your life and career. You are a lifetime learner, you care about people, and you're now focusing on what you need to do to get things done.
Correct. Oh, I remember the late night conversations with you when I didn't want to do what I had to do to scale my company. So thank you, Rich, always for all your guidance and all your kind words. You've always been a mentor figure to me and many other entrepreneurs at Gathering of Titans. You have coached, I think, 5 or 6 of us in scaling our companies. So first, let me go a little bit back to history. What happened for you when you were around 45 years old in your entrepreneurial experience? What happened to you? Because there was a pivot moment in your life when you were around 45.
Well, I'm not sure what year it was, and it may have been 45 years ago. Uh,
Probably.
but basically, I started a business on the Outer Banks of North Carolina, and it was the jewelry and gift business. And in that business, I learned how to understand the movement of money and how to manage people and how to grow a business. In 10 years, I sold it, took 3.5 months off, which I recommend every entrepreneur do. Get away, think, don't jump into the next thing. And I was fascinated on how businesses changed hands. So I relocated to Richmond, Virginia, and joined a franchise called VR Business Brokers. And while I was there, I learned how not just the fundamentals of managing a business, but what I saw was that buyers would buy lemons and turn them into lemonade,
Yeah.
and buy lemonade and turn them into lemons. And what I realized was it wasn't so much the business, it was the leadership, it was the entrepreneur. and their ability to grasp and grow a business that made all the difference in the world. So I was on more sides of businesses than anybody in the network. And this was a national franchise. And I think the reason was I established trust with buyers and sellers. I understood what they wanted. I understood if the seller really ready to sell, is the buyer really ready to buy? And I focused on putting together win-win deals. In those days, most of the deals were 33% down and then owner financed.
Yep.
And I wanted the owner to get the 60th payment, not just the first 5 or 6. So, because I was successful in a franchise that was not doing well, I was asked to go around the country for them and work with business brokers on how to do it right and work with the owners of the franchises on how to do it better. And that was a real turning point for me because I love teaching, I love coaching, and I love workshops and speaking. So I worked with VR for about 5 years, and then I started my own business, Bottom Line Up. And I've been coaching ever since then, since 1985.
But you went from being an entrepreneur yourself to the dark
Yes,
side to now to coach and help entrepreneurs. First selling their business and then coaching for them to do it right.
yes.
Get them right. All right. So you you teach a lot of cutting edge strategy, technology, things that we have to do, but you also have this very, very practical, simple, and make it happen philosophy. How do you balance that? Because there's a lot of entrepreneurs that they just want the strategy and stay thinking on the stratosphere, and they don't like to execute. And there's some that they just execute, but you could not get them to think. How are you able to do both?
Well, first of all, it's a balance of things. There are fundamentals that don't change. You have to know how to manage people. You have to learn how to delegate, which is a 2-step process. The first step, this is what I want. The second step is making sure they give it to you. There are times when you have to fire, and that's one of the keys to growth. But it's putting together the right team, it's understanding your financials, and it's making sure you have a viable business and financial model for success. And Daniel, the trick is when you get from one level to the next, you have to jump the S curve, which means you get to a certain point and then you start declining a little bit. And if you don't jump the curve, you don't grow.
Yep.
We think of growth like this, but it's the S curve. And you have to grow at each stage of growth. And I think more than anything else, that's where I help companies. And companies say when they're in phase 3, which I consider purgatory, because everything that used to work no longer works.
Yep.
And it's not scalable. And you have all sorts of issues with the CEO not knowing the clients anymore, not knowing some of the people that are hired, some of the people that got you there can't get you to the next level, and everybody's vying for your time. So it's getting through that phase. And when I share this with entrepreneurs, they say, "You mean it's not me?" I say, "No, it's some of it's you, but most of it is understanding each stage of growth and what's required in that stage."
Yeah. So I learned that from you, and I've been having many discussions. That's why the Learning on book, the Learning Up book, it's all about what you have to learn on each of the stages. So you've coached entrepreneurs in many different stages. How do you tailor your teaching, your guidance, depending on their stage? Because as you say, there's entrepreneurs that they think it's their problem when they're stage 3 and it's not about them. But then you have to also help them do that jump to go from stage to stage. How do you do that?
Well, first, let's back up a little bit.
Yep.
If there are 3 businesses that
Yes.
are all in the same industry and they're all making the same amount of money, and I come in to coach them, there may be 3 different strategies required.
course.
One may be on the way up, one may be on the way down, one may be stagnant, one may be in a situation where they don't know how to lead, or they don't have the right players, or they don't have the right financial model in place. So I'm a believer that prescription without diagnosis is malpractice. So the first thing I do is, and Mo does this with me, we interview um, the majority of the team. And for one brief moment in time, after we talk to the whole team, we know more about that business than anybody. And we see stars that the CEO hasn't recognized. And we see interior terrorists that they better get rid of. And we look at what are some of the patterns? We ask questions like, what do you like about the business most? What do you like about working here the most? What do you like about the CEO? If you could change one thing about your CEO or person you're reporting to, what would that be? If you had 3 wishes for the company, what would they be? And we get a massive amount of information. We study their financials. We look at their client list. We look at their aging reports. We look at their balance sheet. We look at their uh, presence online, on social media, and we ask the CEO, "What are your goals?" And what we find is that we don't necessarily manage the company; we manage the goals. So, Daniel, if I'm managing your goals and you're saying your goals are to do X, Y, and Z, and then 3 months later, you haven't taken a single step to that,
Yeah.
I might say, I might have it wrong, Daniel. I thought this was what you wanted to achieve.
I
So,
even remember those calls that used to give me. You lower your glasses, and it was like, give me the grandfather look, and it felt terrible. You used to do that. I knew it was coming when you told me that.
and Daniel, that's another thing. It's giving the right advice at the right time.
Yeah.
I may see things that I know you need to address, but you're not going to hear it yet.
Or I'm not willing to do it. I don't want to hear it, or I'm not willing to do it. So,
Yes.
Rich, you go back to MIT, to the Entrepreneur Master programs every year. So we first met in EO in Mexico, and then when we connected again was at Birthing of Giants, or EMP, at MIT.
Yes.
And you continue to go. You've been going for almost 20 years, or more than 20 years, every
Yes.
year, to help entrepreneurs. So today you're teaching something you call the taking the big leap. What is that? What is your new
So,
teaching?
so when I was very fortunate to be with the Ink Consulting division, that after Ink changed management, they did away with that. We studied the companies that we found 18 to 20% of the companies that made the Inc. list were out of business within 2 years of making it. And we wanted to find out why. And it wasn't the economy, it wasn't the industry, it wasn't the ability to raise capital. It was the fundamental things that business owners do at each stage of growth. So I thought I had it wired. And then when Mo and I were married, Mo said, we've been married before. I'm not getting married to get divorced. Would you be willing to take some coaching with me on relationships? So that's how we met Gay Hendricks, who wrote the book, Taking Your Big Leap. And
Nice.
when I read the book, it was a paradigm shift. Those things that were essential for the CEO to focus on weren't all the problems. What the book talks about is 2 key things. One is uh, finding your zone of genius. We have a zone of incompetence, which are
Oh
things
yeah.
we suck at that we should
Oh
never
yes.
do.
Oh yes.
We have a zone of competence. We're okay at it, but other people can do it way better. And the trap, Daniel, is the zone of excellence because we're really good at it, but it doesn't light our fire. It's not our zone of genius. So what happens is we get caught in that and we burn out. If you're in your zone of genius, if you find what it is you love doing and do best, and you focus on that, then you will continue to thrive and prosper and have high energy. So that's a key component of it, finding your zone of genius. For me, coaching is in my zone of genius. Writing is now in my zone of genius. Cooking is in my zone of genius. So I put 90% of my time into my zone of genius, and I don't do the things that I don't do well. So that's a critical component. And we also then look to put team members where their zone of genius is, because otherwise we're not getting the best out of them and they will burn out. So that's the first piece. The second thing that holds us back from childhood, and I know a few of yours from childhood.
Of course, you know me very well.
And I know mine, and I know Mo. So, for example, I'm working with a client who his upper limit barrier is that he feels like he's a burden on others because when he was born, his dad was 40. And when his dad was younger, he would go to the Little League games with his kids. He would go to PTA meetings. By the time this client was born, the dad was traveling all over the world working with GE. And anytime he asked for something, he felt like it was a burden on his dad. For me, an upper limits barrier was I'm not worthy. I was a terrible student in school. And people told me that I was lazy and that I wasn't so smart.
Yeah.
Well, thank goodness somebody wrote a book called Emotional Intelligence, and I found out where I was smart. But I also know I couldn't sit in a classroom like most ADD
By the way,
entrepreneurs.
a lot of the books that are here I read because of you. Every
Thank
time
you.
you and I had a conversation, you recommend a different book, and you gave me a homework that I had to go through them. So I remember that perfectly.
Yes, and you did your homework.
Like Crucial Conversations and all those.
Oh, that's so critical.
Yeah, so critical. All right. Hey, you talk with CEOs all the time today. What challenges are you seeing in today's economy or in today's world that entrepreneurs and CEOs are having?
Well, let me give you something so simple first.
Yep.
We get an average of 150 notifications a day on our phone and on our computers. And
Yeah.
of course, we're ADD. So what do we do? We go, oh, I'll take a look at this. And we lose focus.
Yeah.
It's
Guilty, Your
also,
Honor.
it's hard not to be.
Yeah.
So the first thing is, if you'll pardon me, I'll try to say it in a way I can get away. I think away with it. One of the few quotes I've come up with is, "If we don't focus, it'll fuck us." So we have to know how to focus, and we have to be able to block out time and put it where it needs to be to get things done. I'm a firm believer that discipline is overrated and commitment is underappreciated. And when a commitment is something you make to yourself, and because it's a commitment, you do it. The other things that we're talking about changes, CRM has changed so much. AI is about to change our world significantly. And so we're always looking at the best software, the new things. And I think one of the challenges is we tend to jump on trends and say, oh, that'll be the savior for me. And then we jump on the next trend and the next trend.
Every workshop I attend, my team is afraid when I come back because they know I'm going to come up with the next trend and I want to change everything in my business.
Well, the other part about that is you have to know how to sell it. And let me just share something with you that I learned the very hard way. I was working with a client many years ago who was extraordinarily successful, and he was high up in Scientology.
Oh, wow.
And L. Ron Hubbard had a system for managing a business, and he shared it with me. And then I shared it with the client, and the client said, I love that. Let's bring in our team and talk to them about it. And as soon as I mentioned the word Scientology, they turned it off. And so I got fired. But the thing is, you get change in two ways. First of all, emotionally, logically. Why is it important? Why do we want to do this? What is it going to get us? And then secondly, emotionally, which is what's in it for me. And if you come back with a change and we're going to throw out everything we've done and now we're going to start some, and I don't mean you in particular, and we're going to do the next best thing, people say, this guy's got no continuity. And I can't afford to get invested in this because 3 months later, he's going to go to an EO forum event and come back with something else. So there has to be consistency. And to get change, you have to explain the why and get the buy-in from the people.
Hey, you've been coaching me entrepreneurs and you've been helping me and you've been huge for my growth. So this is the Learning Up podcast. As entrepreneurs and leaders, we have to learn up consistently. How does mentorship, continuous learning play in the role of the CEO and the entrepreneur? And how do you bring that on your coaching? How do you help them do that?
Well, there's an old story that the coach borrows your watch to tell you the time and then gets to keep the watch. And what that means is you tell me your problem, and then I look at it and give you a solution and give you back the watch. The real success of a great coach is how many watches they have because of what I've learned from you. So what I bring is a wealth of experience. I'm not sure I have wisdom, but I sure have perspective.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm able to bring that perspective to a client, and I'm able, and I don't mean this in a negative way, to dumb it down so the client gets it and sees the gap between where they are and potentially where they can go if they buy in.
Right.
Did I answer the question or take us
Yes.
off?
No, it was good. But hey, and how do you grow? Like, what's next for you? You've had probably 5 or 6 lives. You've reinvented yourself so many times. What's next for you? And by the way, you just sold your house, and you're
Yes.
traveling and moving all over. I before we start recording, I told you I admire that you have this still very young mind. And at one moment, just last year, you said, I'm going to sell my house. I'm going to look for a place to live. And you've been moving around and really traveling a lot. So what's next for you what's your next challenge? What's your next growth in business?
Well, first of all, I don't consider it as reinventing myself. I look at it as the next chapter.
Okay. What is that next chapter for you?
One thing builds from another. Well, I'm very fortunate to have a network of EOs that I've worked with, EO entrepreneurs that I've worked with. And one of the clients I've worked with, we're looking to put together something we're going to call the Freedom Academy.
Okay.
And we're going to give entrepreneurs the opportunity to answer some questions. And based upon that, tell them what their EBITDA would be today and the likely multiple would be given where they are. So is it a strategic sale or a financial sale? And then help them get to the point where they can take it further. And we're going to start interviewing 50 entrepreneurs who have sold their business to learn the good, the bad, and the ugly about the sale. And ironically, I have two clients that were their business was absolutely not for sale until they talked to a venture capital firm and they both sold it. One of them is gone and happy. The other one wished he hadn't made the sale. And I wrote a post recently. Instead of calling it buyer beware, I call it seller beware because be aware of who you're selling it to and what they can do with it. So, what I want, just to give you an example of what I'm learning from talking to entrepreneurs that sell their business. One of my clients was supposed to close on the 25th of the month
Yep.
for a sale. Their attorney held up the sale and it didn't close till the 6th of the next month, which
Why?
meant he had to meet another payroll and throw away $600,000.
Oh,
So who would think about that?
yeah.
So I want to compile all this and do podcasts, do a book, and do programs working with Kevin for entrepreneurs. And the irony of it is, if you can create your business to go to a professional company, which means it can operate without you very well, it's a more value to a buyer
100%.
than if it's a business that really just depends on you. So the first stage is how do you get there? And then the second stage is after you sell, what do you do? And I'll bet you and I could spend the next hour talking about entrepreneurs that sold their business and did really stupid things afterwards.
Oh, yes. And we know several stories of those. That they become we've something that I've been seeing recently. They are asset rich but cash poor. No,
Oh
they
my
make
God.
so many mistakes like that.
Oh, I'm glad you said that because it reminds me of a fundamental that you ask what I try to teach
Yeah.
entrepreneurs. The top line is for ego. The bottom line is how savvy entrepreneurs keep score. And it's not what you make, it's what you keep.
Whew, right. Let me just close with selling of the business. Let me go last question here. I help several of my clients sell their companies, and I sometimes talk to a client and said, "I'm never going to sell it. I never build my business for selling it." They're going to end up selling it, even or leaving the business, even with their feet up front, but they're going to leave their business. So let's talk a little bit about this. What that psychology that said, hey, they were not ready to sell. You put them in contact with a VC and they got excited and sold it. So why we don't think about selling it, and then why it's important to really think about selling it?
Well, first of all, selling your business is ultimately the greatest sale you ever had if you've done it right.
Yep. Yep.
And secondly,
And you could
any
multiply your the price if you do it right.
yes, and being able to make a financial sale as opposed to a strategic
Yeah.
sale is important. And here's a fundamental paradox. I worked with a lady in St. Louis that owned a Valpak franchise, and she inherited it after her husband passed away. And Valpak had hired me to help them look at franchises that weren't doing well and put together a resale program to get out. And she said to me, Rich, what do you think my business is worth? No, she said, Rich, I want $3 million for my business. What do
Yep.
you think? And I said, well, Anne, you need to do this, 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 and this. And then you can get 3 million. And she said to me, In other words, if I want to get out of it, I have to get into it.
Yes.
So the paradox is the very things that make a great business built to last are the things that make a great business built to flip.
100%. 100%. And by the way, when someone approached me and said, hey, I want to sell my business, I usually said, hey, we make a diagnosis or analysis or assessment, and we realize, hey, if you fix these three things, you're probably going to get 20, 30% more value. And they say, well, but I won't sell it now. Yeah, but if you really get your head down and fix these three things in the next 3 years, you probably get 30 or 40 or 50% more. How do you convince them to do that? Have you had that issue?
Well, it's up to where they are. If they're burned out, then they don't have the enthusiasm or the energy to do it, and they may need to get out. May I share one story
Please,
that a
please,
client
please.
shared with me? I had a client that has an advisory board, and it's 4 people that meet with him once a month. He pays them $1,000, and he says preparation for that meeting is the highest and best use of his time. And one of them said to him, there are 3 times to sell your business. One, when you want to sell it, and that's when you get the least.
Yep.
2, when your the market wants to buy it. That's the 3rd. That's when you get the highest return.
When the market wants to buy it, yes.
Yes, not when you want to sell it. Not just when it's ready to sell, but when the market sees it. And you can do things to make your business sexy, determine who the buyers should be, and build a business plan for them, particularly if they're buying an M&A buyers. But I would sure look at their track record and talk to people that they sold their business to, and were they happy that they sold it to them? It's still your baby, even once you let it go.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I 100% agree with you there. I've never heard it that way. But the best thing that could happen is that you're scaling your business really fast and great. And then someone comes and knocks on your door and said, I want to buy your business. Golden evaluation when you do that.
Thank you.
All right. Rich, always a pleasure. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for your coaching. When I moved to the US 19 years ago, you were invaluable. The amount of time that I spent with you, the coaching, everything that you did for me was really, really amazing. And I've heard amazing stories from other entrepreneurs, other titans that have been coached by you. I remember perfectly. You were in New York, September 11, working
Yes.
with a recovery business that just blew up 5 times or so. I
Yeah,
remember exactly the story.
it was Damon Gersh's
Damon.
business.
Yeah.
And he was in the fire, flood, soot, and smoke damage restoration business.
The day of
And
September 11 in New York.
Yes, and ironically, I was there to teach a program on leadership.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't have to. 9/11, for 6 months, they were at ground zero. And there's one key point. They had more revenue as a result of that than they had ever had. And what Damon said afterwards is, now we know what we can do. And from then on in, their revenue continued to grow.
Brilliant. All right. Whenever you get lemons, you make lemonade. And you were in the right
Yep.
spot, helping the right entrepreneur. Right. Rich, always a pleasure. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for your coaching. And hope everyone heard some great lessons from an entrepreneur and a coach that has been coaching entrepreneurs for many, many years, teaching them
And
how
if
to
there's
scale up.
if there's anyone that this inspired or is looking for
So
just
that's
talk to me for an hour, just reach out.
the next question. If someone wants to reach out to you, where can they look for you? Any social media? How can they get in contact with you?
At coachtothebest.com. And the proof that I'm coach to the best is I coached you.
Thank you. Really, really appreciate that closing. Amigo, it's always a pleasure. Thank you.
Gracias.